Rain hammered the alley like fists on tin. Jonah Reyes heard it before he saw it, the muffled cry, the scrape of boots on wet pavement, the kind of silence that comes right before someone gets hurt. He wasn't looking for trouble, never was. But his 7-year-old daughter's hand went rigid in his, and when Lila whispered those 4 words that would change everything, "Daddy, they're hurting her," Jonah knew invisible wasn't an option anymore. 3 men, 1 young woman pressed against brick, her bag spilled across the ground. The men hadn't seen him yet. Jonah's jaw tightened. He'd spent 6 years trying to be nobody, just another dock worker in a worn jacket, just another single dad picking up his kid from after-school care. But some things you don't unlearn. "Lila," he said quietly, his voice steady as stone. "Behind me. No matter what happens, you stay behind me." Her small fingers released his hand. He felt her move into his shadow. The closest man was still laughing when Jonah reached him. The umbrella Jonah had been carrying wasn't expensive, but the curved handle was solid enough. 1 clean hook to the wrist, and the man's grip on the woman's jacket went slack. He howled, stumbled back. "Let her go," Jonah said, not loud. "Final." The second man turned, eyes wide, then narrowing. "You got a death wish, Doc Rat?" Jonah's hand dipped into his pocket. The bent brass compass, Mara's compass, the one she'd pressed into his palm on their wedding day with that crooked smile, and the words, "Find your way back to us," slid between his fingers. It wasn't much. Just old brass with a tiny star engraved on the back. But when you know where to strike, you don't need much. He jabbed it hard into the nerve cluster just above the man's collarbone. Not enough to do real damage, enough to drop him like a bag of sand. "1," Jonah said. The woman was scrambling backward now, eyes locked on him, terror shifting to confusion. The third man was bigger, angrier. He came fast, swinging wild. Jonah sidestepped, let the momentum carry the guy past, and grabbed a broken shipping crate leaning against the dumpster. The wood was weathered but solid. He brought it across the man's forearm, sharp, controlled. The man bellowed, dropped to 1 knee. 2. Jonah pulled the plastic zip tie from his pocket. He always carried a few. You learned to be ready when you worked the docks, when cargo went missing, when someone needed to be held until the cops arrived. He yanked the man's wrists together, threaded the tie, pulled it snug. 3. 10 seconds. Maybe less. 3 men on the ground, 1 cradling his wrist, 1 gasping for breath, 1 zip-tied and swearing into the wet pavement. That's when the phones came out. Jonah saw the light first, the glow of a screen, then another, then 3 more. A small crowd had gathered at the mouth of the alley, the kind of people who smell drama before they smell danger. Someone laughed. Someone else whispered. The woman he'd pulled free was standing now, shaking, staring at him like he'd stepped out of a comic book. "You good?" Jonah asked her, his voice low. She nodded, too rattled to speak. "Get somewhere safe," he said. "Cops'll be here soon." One of the men on the ground, the one with the zip tie, spat onto the pavement and looked up at Jonah with eyes full of venom. "We'll remember you, Doc Rat. You and your little girl." Jonah's blood went cold. He turned fast, one hand reaching for Lila, the other still gripping the compass hard enough to leave a mark. She was there, right where he'd told her to stay, her eyes huge and wet with fear. "Come on, baby," he said, pulling her close. "We're going home." But as they walked past the phones, past the muttering crowd, past the guy in the red jacket who was already typing with a smirk on his face, Jonah knew it was too late. One of those cameras had caught him clean full face, no shadows, no mercy in his eyes. By the time they reached their apartment, the video was already live. The apartment was small. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that smelled like yesterday's toast, and a living room where Lila's crayon drawings covered the walls like bright, crooked prayers. Jonah set his keys on the counter and checked the locks twice. Old habit, the kind you pick up when you've spent years standing between people and the things that want to kill them. Lila sat at the kitchen table, her legs swinging, not quite reaching the floor. She was drawing again another sun, another house, another stick-figure version of the 2 of them holding hands under a sky full of stars. She always drew stars. She said they reminded her of Mama. Jonah filled the kettle, set it on the stove, and tried to ignore the itch in his gut that told him tonight was different. The rain tapped against the window. His phone sat silent on the counter, face down. He'd turned off the notifications after the first 50. "Daddy?" Lila's voice was small. "Yeah, baby? Did you hurt those men?" Jonah turned, met her eyes. She looked so much like Mara it hurt. Same dark curls, same wide, searching gaze, same way of asking questions that didn't have easy answers. He walked over, crouched beside her chair so they were eye to eye. "I stopped them from hurting someone. That's different. But they were mad at you." "Yeah, they were. Are they going to come find us?" Jonah's chest tightened. He reached out, tucked a curl behind her ear. "No one's going to hurt you, Lila. I promise." She stared at him for a long moment, then nodded and went back to her drawing. But Jonah could see the tremble in her hand, the way the crayon pressed too hard, leaving jagged lines where smooth ones used to be. He stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the city. Harborview was all rust and neon, old warehouses stacked against new high-rises, the kind of place where people kept their heads down and their doors locked. He'd chosen it for exactly that reason. Anonymous, forgettable, safe. Except now he wasn't anonymous anymore. The kettle screamed. Jonah turned off the stove, poured the water, watched the steam rise and twist in the yellow light. On the counter, his phone buzzed. Then again. He picked it up. The screen was a flood of notifications, texts, missed calls, app alerts. But it was the video that stopped him cold. Someone had titled it, "Delivery Boy Batman Wrecks 3 Dudes in 10 Seconds. It had 40,000 views. The comments were a mix of awe and poison. "Bro went full John Wick over some random chick. Excessive force much? Where are the cops? Show. I know that face. Harborview docs. Someone find this guy." Jonah's stomach dropped. He scrolled further. Another video, same angle, zoomed in. His face filled the frame, jaw set, eyes hard, the bent brass compass still visible in his hand. Someone had screenshotted it, enhanced it, posted it with the caption, "Who is this guy?" He locked the phone, set it down, pressed his palms flat against the counter. His heart was hammering now, the old instincts kicking in, assess, adapt, move. But move? Where? He had a daughter, a job, a life built on the promise that he'd never have to be that person again. Behind him, Lila hummed softly, coloring her stars. Jonah turned, looked at the photo wall above the couch. Mara smiled back at him from a dozen frames, laughing at the beach, holding newborn Lila, standing beside him in a white dress with that crooked smile. In the center frame, tucked behind the glass, was the photo he couldn't look at too long. The two of them on their wedding day, her hands cupped around his, holding the compass between them like a promise. "Find your way back to us." He'd kept the compass, carried it every day for 6 years, even after she was gone. It was bent now, the needle stuck, the glass cracked, but he couldn't let it go. Jonah walked back to the table, sat down across from Lila. She looked up, gave him a small, tired smile. "You okay, Daddy?" He forced her. Smile back. "Yeah, baby, I'm okay." She reached across the table, patted his hand like she was the parent, and he was the kid. "You always fix things," she said. "That's what you do." Jonah felt something crack open in his chest. He squeezed her hand gently. "People aren't things, Lila." She tilted her head, considering. "But you still fix them, right?" He didn't have an answer for that. Later, after he'd tucked her in and watched her fall asleep under the glow of her star-shaped nightlight, Jonah stood in the hallway and let himself breathe. The apartment was quiet except for the rain and the hum of the old refrigerator. He should sleep. He should shut it all down and deal with it in the morning. But the phone kept buzzing. He walked back to the kitchen, picked it up, scrolled. More comments, more speculation. And then a new notification. A private message from an account with no profile picture. "We know where you work. Stay quiet or your kid pays." Jonah's blood turned to ice. He deleted the message, blocked the account, checked the locks again. Then he walked to Lila's room, stood in the doorway, and watched her sleep. Her small chest rose and fell. Her hand clutched the edge of her blanket. She looked so small, so breakable. "I'm sorry," he whispered into the dark. The rain kept falling, and somewhere out there, the video kept spreading. Morning came too soon. Jonah made toast, packed Lila's lunchbox, tied her shoes, and walked her to the bus stop like it was any other day. But his eyes never stopped moving, scanning faces, checking cars, mapping exits, old habits, the kind that kept you alive. Lila chatted about her drawing, about recess, about the new girl in her class who said she liked stars too. Jonah nodded, smiled, kept one hand on her shoulder the whole way. When the bus pulled up, she turned, wrapped her arms around his waist. "Love you, Daddy. Love you more, baby." She climbed the steps, waved from the window. Jonah waved back until the bus disappeared around the corner. Then he stood there, alone on the empty street, and tried to figure out what came next. He walked back to the apartment slowly, taking the long route, checking reflections in windows, making sure no one was following. The city was waking up: delivery trucks, early commuters, the smell of coffee and exhaust. Everything normal, everything wrong. When he reached the building, he saw the car. A quiet hybrid sedan, dark grey, parked at the curb. Clean, expensive, out of place. Jonah stopped. His hand drifted to his pocket, fingers brushing the compass. He could turn around, walk away, disappear into the city like he'd done 100 times before. But then the driver's door opened. A woman stepped out, mid-30s, tailored raincoat, dark hair pulled back, eyes red-rimmed like she hadn't slept in days. She looked at him, and something in her expression stopped him cold. Not anger, not fear, recognition. "Jonah Reyes," she said, her voice quiet but steady. He didn't answer, didn't move. She took a step closer, hands visible, palms open. "My name is Aria Caldwell. I need 5 minutes of your time. Please." Jonah studied her, the expensive coat, the exhaustion, the way she held herself like someone used to being in control but right now wasn't. He should walk away. He should tell her to leave. But something in her voice made him stop. "How'd you find me?" he asked. "The video," she said. "And a very old debt." Jonah's jaw tightened. "I don't know you." "No," Aria said quietly, "but 14 years ago, you saved my life. And last night, you saved it again." The rain started up, soft at first, then harder. Aria didn't move. Neither did Jonah. Finally, he nodded toward the door. 5 minutes. Before we continue this story, let us know in the comments section where you're watching from, and if this story speaks to you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. The apartment felt smaller with a stranger inside. Aria stood in the doorway, dripping rainwater onto the old wooden floor, her eyes moving across the space, the crayon drawings, the photo wall, the worn furniture that had seen better years. Jonah didn't offer her a seat, didn't offer anything. He just stood there, arms crossed, waiting. "I'm the CEO of Caldwell and North," Aria said, breaking the silence. "Medical technology, coastal rescue funding, community safety grants. You've probably never heard of us." "I haven't," Jonah said flatly. "Good. That's by design." She took a careful step forward. "Last night, the woman you pulled out of that alley, her name is Nora Park. She's my cousin, my only family." Jonah's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. Aria saw it: the way his shoulders dropped half an inch, the way his jaw unclenched just slightly. "Is she okay?" he asked. "Shaken, bruised, alive." Aria's voice cracked on the last word. "Because of you. I did what anyone would." "No." Aria cut him off, her voice suddenly sharp. "You did what almost no one does. You acted, and now the internet is tearing you apart for it." Jonah's mouth pressed into a hard line. He turned away, walked to the kitchen counter, braced his hands against the edge. "Your 5 minutes are up." "I'm not here to thank you," Aria said. "I mean, I am, but that's not why I drove across the city at 6 in the morning." Jonah turned back, his eyes hard. "Then why are you here?" Aria reached into her coat pocket, pulled out her phone, and set it on the counter between them. The screen showed a photo, an old one, grainy and faded. A teenage girl with tear-streaked cheeks standing beside a younger girl, maybe 13 or 14, both wrapped in emergency blankets. Behind them, blurred but visible, was a man in tactical gear, his face partially obscured by shadows. "Ankara," Aria said quietly. 14 years ago, political protest turned violent. My father was there on business, brought me and Nora along because he thought it would be educational," She laughed bitterly. We got separated when the crowd surged. Nora and I ended up trapped in a building that was about to be overrun. Jonah stared at the photo. His hands had gone very still. A team pulled us out, Arya continued. Diplomatic security, contracted through the State Department. I never got their names. My father tried to find them afterward, wanted to thank them properly, but the operation was classified. All he knew was that the team leader had gotten us into an armored van, stayed with us the whole way to the embassy, and gave us these. She reached into her other pocket and pulled out a small brass compass. It was identical to Jonah's, same size, same weight, same tiny star engraved on the back. Jonah felt the air leave his lungs. My father collected them, Arya said. Got one for each member of the team. Had them engraved with the North Star Foundation mark. That's what he called his charity work back then. He wanted to give them to the people who saved us, but he only managed to hand out 2 before the team disappeared back into whatever black site paperwork they came from. She set the compass on the counter, right next to Jonah's phone. I saw yours last night, she said. In the video. Someone zoomed in, enhanced the image. That star. I've been staring at that star my whole life, wondering if I'd ever see another one. Jonah picked up his compass slowly, turned it over in his palm. The brass was warm from his pocket, the engraving worn smooth from years of worry and touch. He'd never told anyone where it came from. Mara had thought it was a family heirloom. Lila thought it was magic. You were the girl in the pink jacket, he said quietly. Wouldn't stop crying. Arya's eyes filled. I was 15. I thought we were going to die. You almost did. Jonah set the compass down. Building collapsed 20 minutes after we got you out. They stood there in silence, the rain hammering the window, the weight of 14 years pressing down between them. Why are you telling me this? Jonah finally asked. Because you didn't just save a stranger last night, Arya said. You saved the person I love most in this world. Again. And now people are threatening you for it. I've seen the messages, Jonah. I've seen what they're saying about you, about your daughter. Jonah's face went cold. How do you know about? I run a company that monitors digital threats for non-profits and NGOs, Arya said. When I saw the video, I pulled every piece of metadata I could find. I'm not here to invade your privacy. I'm here because I know what it's like to be hunted, and I know you're trying to protect someone small and precious, and I can't let you do that alone. Jonah turned away, his hands curling into fists. I don't need your help. Yes, you do. Arya's voice was gentle but unyielding. The video has 2 million views. Your face is everywhere. Someone identified the dock where you work. Someone else posted your building. Address they got it wrong, but they're getting closer. You can't outrun this, Jonah. Not anymore. So what? Jonah's voice was raw. You want me to go public? Do some feel-good interview where I talk about being a hero. I'm not a hero. I'm just a guy trying to keep his kids safe. I don't want you to be a hero, Arya said. I want you to be visible on your own terms before someone else writes the story for you. Jonah shook his head. No. I spent 6 years building a life where no one knows who I am or what I used to do. I'm not throwing that away. You already did, Arya said quietly, the second you stepped into that alley. The words hung between them like smoke. Jonah walked to the window, looked out at the grey morning, the rain streaking the glass like tears. He thought about Lila on the bus, waving at him with that gap-toothed smile. He thought about the message last night your kid pays. He thought about Mara's voice, soft and steady in his memory. Find your way back to us. What do you want from me? He asked, not turning around. I want to tell the truth, Arya said. Not spin, not PR, just facts. Police are reviewing the incident. You acted to prevent harm. You're a father, a working man, someone who saw a person in danger and chose not to look away. Let me give a statement. Brief, measured, no theatrics. Let me shift the narrative before it buries you. Jonah turned. And what do you get out of this? Peace, Arya said simply. For 14 years I've wondered if I'd ever get to say thank you. Let me say it properly. Jonah studied her, the exhaustion in her face, the steadiness in her voice, the way she held herself like someone who'd learned to carry weight without breaking. He didn't trust easily. Hadn't in a long time. But something in Arya's eyes reminded him of the girl in the pink jacket, the one who'd gripped his hand so hard she left marks, the one who'd whispered, Please don't let go. One statement, he said. That's it. My name stays out of the press. Lila stays protected. Deal, Arya said immediately. Jonah nodded slowly. Then we have an agreement. The press conference happened fast. Arya didn't waste time. She had a venue, a prepared statement, and a legal team on standby within hours. Jonah stayed home, watched it on his phone with the volume low, so Lila wouldn't hear from her room where she was supposed to be doing homework. Arya stood at a simple podium. No flashy logos, no dramatic lighting. Just her and a microphone and a room full of reporters who smelled blood in the water. Good afternoon, she said, her voice calm. My name is Arya Caldwell, CEO of Caldwell & North. I'm here to address the incident that occurred in Harborview 2 nights ago. The cameras clicked like insects. The woman who was assaulted is my cousin, Nora Park. She is safe, recovering, and has provided a full statement to police. The man who intervened is a private citizen who acted to prevent further harm. He is a father. He is a working member of this community, and he deserves dignity, not vilification. Someone shouted a question. Arya ignored it. The police are reviewing all available footage and witness statements. Charges are being filed against the 3 men involved in the assault. The individual who intervened will not be facing charges. This is not a story about vigilantism. This is a story about a person who refused to look away when someone needed help. Another shout, another flash. I will not be taking questions about his identity. I will not be providing details that could endanger his family. What I will say is this. 14 years ago, I was pulled out of a life-threatening situation by people who didn't have to help me. Last week, it happened again. Courage doesn't need a cape. Sometimes it just needs a conscience. She stepped back from the podium. The room erupted, but Arya was already walking away, her security closing in around her like a wall. Jonah watched the whole thing on his cracked phone screen, and for the first time in 2 days, he felt like he could breathe. The shift was immediate. By evening, the headlines had changed. CEO confirms assault prevention, praises intervening citizen, Harborview, hero identity protected, per victim's family request. The comment sections were still a mess, but the tone had shifted. Less accusation, more curiosity. Less rage, more respect. Jonah's phone stopped buzzing with threats. Started buzzing with something else, messages from neighbors, co-workers, people he barely knew. Proud of you, man. That took guts. Buy you a coffee sometime? He didn't know what to do with any of it. That night, there was a knock at the door. Jonah checked the peephole, saw a young woman holding a foil-covered plate, and recognized her immediately. Nora Park looked smaller in person, younger, her face still carrying the shadow of fear, but her eyes bright with something like hope. He opened the door slowly. Hi, Nora said, her voice shy. I baked muffins at 3 a.m. because I couldn't sleep, and I thought, I don't know, I thought maybe you'd like some. Jonah stared at her, then at the muffins, then back at her. You didn't have to. I know, Nora said quickly. But I wanted to. I needed to. I haven't been able to stop thinking about what would have happened if you hadn't. Her voice cracked. She took a breath, steadied herself. Can I just say thank you? In person? Jonah stepped aside. Come in. Nora walked in carefully, like she was entering a museum. She set the muffins on the counter, looked around at the drawings, the photos, the life Jonah had built in the margins of anonymity. Daddy? Lila appeared in the hallway, rubbing her eyes. Who's that? This is Nora, Jonah said gently. She's a friend. Lila studied Nora with the solemn intensity only 7-year-olds can manage. Then she walked over, tugged on Nora's sleeve, and said, Do you like bracelets? Nora blinked. Yes? Good. I'm going to teach you how to make one. And just like that, Lila dragged Nora to the kitchen table, dumped out her box of embroidery floss, and started explaining the intricacies of friendship bracelet architecture with the confidence of a tenured professor. Jonah watched from the doorway, something warm and unfamiliar unfolding in his chest. Nora was laughing, really laughing, bright and unguarded as Lila demonstrated a particularly complicated knot. The two of them bent over the strings, their heads close together, Lila's small hands guiding Nora's larger ones. You gotta pull tight, Lila said seriously, or it falls apart. Like people, Nora murmured. Lila looked up, tilted her head. What? Nothing, Nora said, smiling. Show me the next part. They worked in comfortable silence, the kind that only happens when people feel safe. Jonah made tea, set out the muffins. They were lopsided, but smelled like cinnamon and warmth, and let himself believe, just for a moment, that maybe things could be okay. An hour later, when Nora stood to leave, she had a bracelet on her wrist, blue and silver, Lila's signature colors. She kept touching it like she couldn't believe it was real. Thank you, she said to Jonah at the door, for everything. You don't have to keep thanking me, Jonah said. Yeah, Nora said softly. I do. You didn't just stop them from hurting me. I heard you before I saw you. Your voice. You sounded like home getting closer. Jonah's throat tightened. He nodded, didn't trust himself to speak. Nora left, and Jonah closed the door, locked it, and stood there for a long moment. I like her, Lila announced from the table. She's nice. Yeah, Jonah said. She is? Lila yawned, stretched. Daddy? Are people still mad at you? Jonah walked over, crouched beside her chair. Some people are, but not the ones who matter. Good, Lila said. She wrapped her arms around his neck, squeezed tight. Because you're the best daddy ever. Jonah held her close, pressed his face into her hair, and tried not to think about how fragile everything was, how one wrong move, one bad decision, could shatter the small, precious world they'd built together. But for tonight, they were okay. For tonight, that was enough. The next morning, Jonah's phone rang while he was pouring cereal. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Mr. Reyes? A man's voice, calm and official. This is Detective Morris, Harborview PD. I wanted to update you on the case. Jonah's hand tightened on the phone. I'm listening. We've reviewed all available footage, corner store, parking lot, 3 different angles. Your actions align with witness statements, including Miss Parks. The DA has decided not to pursue any charges against you. We're moving forward with assault and attempted battery charges against the 3 men involved. Jonah exhaled slowly. What about the threats? The messages people have been sending? We're aware. Most are keyboard warriors who won't follow through, but we've flagged the serious ones. One of the men from the alley has priors. We're keeping an eye on his known associates. For now, you're clear. And Mr. Reyes? Yeah? Off the record? You did the right thing. Not everyone would have. I had my daughter with me, Jonah said quietly. Doing nothing wasn't an option. No, Morris said. I suppose it wasn't. The call ended. Jonah set the phone down, stared at it for a long moment. Lila appeared, dragging her backpack. Cereal's getting soggy. Right. Jonah smiled, poured milk, tried to shake the feeling that the other shoe was about to drop. It didn't. Not that day. Not the next. The video views plateaued. The comments turned lukewarm. People moved on to the next outrage, the next spectacle. Jonah's face faded from the front page of local news sites, replaced by traffic updates and weather reports. Life, improbably, returned to something like normal. Except it didn't. Not really. Because 3 days after the press conference, Aria Caldwell knocked on his door again. And this time, she wasn't alone. Jonah opened the door to find Aria standing in the hallway, but this time she was dressed differently, business casual, her hair down, softer somehow. Beside her stood an older man in a crisp suit, carrying a leather briefcase that had seen better days, but was clearly expensive once upon a time. I know I said I wouldn't bother you again, Aria said quickly, but I need you to hear something. This is Marcus Chen, General Counsel for the North Star Foundation. Can we come in? Jonah hesitated. Lila was at school. The apartment was quiet. Every instinct told him to say no, to close the door, to protect the fragile peace they'd just started to rebuild. But Aria's eyes held something he recognized, the same desperate hope he'd seen in that building in Ankara, the same plea that said, please, just listen. He stepped aside. They sat at the kitchen table, the same one where Lila had taught Nora to braid bracelets 3 nights ago. Marcus opened his briefcase with careful precision, pulled out a folder, and slid it across the table. Mr. Reyes, Marcus said, his voice measured. Miss Caldwell has asked me to draft a proposal. You're under no obligation to accept. This is simply an offer, with no strings attached beyond what's written in these documents. Jonah didn't touch the folder. What kind of offer? Arya leaned forward. The North Star Foundation, the charity my father started after Ankara, it's grown. We fund coastal rescue programs, community safety initiatives, bystander intervention training. We work with schools, docks, neighborhoods like this one, and we need someone to run the community safety division. Jonah's jaw tightened. I'm not qualified. You're the most qualified person I've ever met. Arya interrupted. You have tactical training, crisis management experience, and something most people don't have: you actually care. You see someone in trouble and you move. That's not something you can teach. I'm a dock worker, Jonah said flatly. I load cargo and go home. That's what I do now. By choice or by necessity? Arya asked gently. Jonah didn't answer. Marcus cleared his throat. The position would involve developing curriculum for bystander intervention programs, coordinating with local law enforcement and schools, managing grants for neighborhood safety initiatives, and serving as a liaison between the foundation and communities like Harborview. The salary is competitive. Benefits include full health coverage, flexible hours, and education assistance. Education assistance, Jonah repeated. For dependents, Marcus clarified. College fund, tutoring support, private school if you choose. Miss Caldwell insisted on it. Jonah looked at Arya. Why? Because you saved my family twice, Arya said simply, and because I've spent the last week watching you try to disappear when what the world needs is more people like you showing up. You think keeping Lila safe means staying invisible. I'm offering you a way to keep her safe while teaching other people how to do what you did, how to not look away. Jonah shook his head. I can't. I have a routine. Lila has a school, friends, a life here. I'm not uprooting her because you wouldn't have to, Arya said. The foundation has an office in Harborview. You'd work locally, and if you ever wanted to relocate, better neighborhood, safer building, the foundation would help with that too. But only if you want to. Jonah stood abruptly, walked to the window. Outside, the city moved in its familiar rhythm: delivery trucks, morning joggers, the world turning like it always had. He'd spent 6 years trying to be part of that rhythm, just another gear in the machine, anonymous and safe. But Lila's voice echoed in his head. You fix things, Daddy. That's what you do. I'm not who you think I am, Jonah said quietly. I left that life because I was good at it, and being good at violence isn't something I wanted my daughter to grow up around. I'm not asking you to be violent, Arya said. I'm asking you to be present, to train people to recognize danger before it escalates, to create systems that protect people without needing someone like you to step in at the last second. You can't save everyone, Jonah, but you can teach people to save each other. Jonah turned. And if I say no, then we say thank you and leave, Arya said. No pressure, no guilt. You've already given us more than we had any right to ask for. The room fell silent except for the ticking of the old clock on the wall, the one Mara had insisted on buying at a yard sale because she said every home needed a present. Heartbeat. Jonah walked back to the table, finally opened the folder. Inside were contracts, job descriptions, salary figures that made his chest tight because they were more than he'd made in 3 years at the docks. But there was something else too, a handwritten note on North Star. Letterhead, Mr. Reyes. My father spent the last 10 years of his life trying to find the people who saved us. He wanted to tell them that courage isn't just about the moment. It's about what you do after, when the cameras are gone and the world forgets. He never got to say that. I'm saying it now. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for staying. A.C. Jonah's hands were shaking. He set the note down carefully, like it might dissolve if he held it too long. I need conditions, he said. Name them, Arya replied immediately. Lila's schedule comes first, always. If she has a recital or a parent-teacher conference or just a bad day, I'm there. No exceptions. Agreed. No off-books operations, no favors that put me back in the field. I train, I coordinate, I consult. That's it. Absolutely. And I want counseling support, for both of us. Lila's been through enough. If this changes our life, I need to make sure she has someone to talk to who isn't me. Arya nodded. Already in the benefits package. I insisted on it. Jonah looked at Marcus. Is that all enforceable? In writing? Marcus tapped the contract. Every word. Miss Caldwell doesn't make promises she can't keep. Jonah sat back down, stared at the papers spread across the table, contracts and clauses, and the possibility of a life that didn't require him to choose between who he was and who he needed to be for his daughter. I need to think about it, he said finally. Of course, Arya said. Take your time. The offer stands as long as you need it to. She stood, and Marcus followed suit, packing the folder back into his briefcase with the same careful precision. At the door, Arya paused. Jonah, she said, that compass you carry, the one my father gave you. Do you know what he used to say about the North Star mark? Jonah shook his head. He said true north isn't a place. It's a promise. The promise that no matter how lost you get, there's always a way home. She smiled, tired but genuine. You've been pointing other people home for a long time. Maybe it's time to let someone point you there too. She left. The door clicked shut. Jonah stood in the sudden silence, the compass heavy in his pocket. That evening, Jonah sat on the small balcony outside the apartment, barely big enough for 2 chairs and a dying plant. Lila kept trying to resurrect and watch the city lights flicker on one by one. The rain had stopped. The air smelled like wet pavement and possibility. He heard the door slide open behind him. Lila padded out in her dinosaur pajamas, clutching a blanket. You okay, Daddy? Jonah pulled her into his lap, wrapped the blanket around both of them. Yeah, baby. Just thinking. About the lady. How'd you know? Lila shrugged. You make the same face you made when Mama was in the hospital. The thinking really hard face. Jonah's chest tightened. Yeah, I'm thinking about a job. A different job. One where I'd help people learn how to be safe. Like you helped that lady in the alley? Sort of. But more talking. Less. He gestured vaguely. Fighting? Lila supplied helpfully. Yeah, less fighting. Lila was quiet for a moment, her head resting against his chest. Then she said, Would we have to move? No. We'd stay right here. Would you be gone a lot? No more than I am now. Maybe less. Would you be happy? The question hit him like a punch. Jonah looked down at his daughter, 7 years old, and already seeing through him like glass. I think so, he said honestly. But only if you're happy too. Lila thought about this with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice. Finally, she nodded. Okay, you should do it. Just like that? Daddy, you're really good at helping people. Like, really, really good. It's kinda your superpower. She twisted in his lap to look up at him. Mama would want you to use it, right? Jonah felt his eyes burn. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head, breathed in the scent of her strawberry shampoo and the indefinable smell of childhood, innocent and fleeting and unbearably precious. Yeah, he whispered. She would. They sat there until the stars came out, just a few, barely visible through the city light pollution, but Lila counted them anyway, like she always did. Daddy? She said sleepily. Which way is home? Jonah pulled out the bent brass compass, turned it in his palm. The needle was stuck, the glass cracked, but the star engraving caught the light from the kitchen, sharp and clear. Home is where I can keep you safe, he said slowly, and where I can help other people get there too. Lila smiled against his chest. That's a good answer. Yeah? Yeah? Yeah. The next morning, Jonah called Arya before he could talk himself out of it. I accept, he said, on the conditions we discussed. There was a pause, then Arya's voice, bright with something that sounded like relief. Welcome to North Star, Jonah. When can you start? 2 weeks. I need to give notice at the docks. Do it right. Of course, Marcus will send over the final paperwork. And Jonah? Yeah? Thank you. For trusting us. For trusting yourself. The call ended. Jonah sat at the kitchen table, staring at the compass, at the contracts, at the life he was about to step into. It felt terrifying and right in equal measure. Lila appeared, already dressed for school, her backpack dragging on the floor. Did you do it? I did it. She grinned, ran over, threw her arms around his neck. I'm proud of you, Daddy. I'm proud of you too, baby. For what? I didn't do anything. You reminded me what home feels like, Jonah said. Eh? That's everything. 3 days later, there was another knock. This time, it was Nora, holding 2 bracelets, one in Lila's signature blue and silver, one in red and gold. I made extras, she said shyly. One for Lila, and one for, I don't know, your first class maybe, if you ever teach kids how to be brave. Jonah took the bracelets carefully, felt their weight, embroidery, floss, and simple knots, but somehow holding more meaning than he knew how to name. Aria told you, he said. She mentioned it. Nora smiled. I also told her I want to volunteer. For the youth programs, I'm studying social work, and I thought, I don't know, maybe I could help. You don't owe us anything, Jonah said. I know. Nora's voice was steady. But you showed me something that night. You showed me that people still show up. I want to be someone who shows up too. Lila bounded over, saw the bracelets, squealed with delight. We match now, all 3 of us. Nora laughed, tied one around Lila's wrist, then offered the other to Jonah. He held out his hand, let her tie it beside his watch, the same wrist that had held the compass, the umbrella, the makeshift weapons that had changed everything. There, Nora said softly. Now you're official. The first day at North Star, Jonah wore slacks that felt too formal and a button-down that Lila had insisted made him look like a real teacher. The office was small but bright, tucked into a renovated warehouse near the docks. Aria met him at the door with coffee and a binder full of program outlines. Orientation starts in an hour, she said. But first, I want to show you something. She led him to a wall covered in photos, faces from a dozen countries, 100 programs. Rescue teams, community leaders, kids in classrooms learning CPR and de-escalation techniques, and in the center, slightly faded, was a photo from Ankara. A teenage Aria and a younger Nora, wrapped in emergency blankets, standing beside a man in tactical gear whose face was mostly obscured but whose stance Jonah recognized immediately. My father kept this in his office, Aria said. After he died, I brought it here. It reminds me why we do this work, why it matters. Jonah stared at the photo, at the ghost of who he used to be, at the girls he'd saved without knowing how their lives would circle back to his. I don't feel like a hero, he said quietly. Good, Aria replied. Heroes are myths. We need people, real people who show up and do the hard thing even when they're scared. She handed him a keycard. Your office is down the hall. Second door on the left. Take your time settling in. We're glad you're here, Jonah. Welcome back to True North. That night, after Lila was asleep and the apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sounds of the city, Jonah sat at the kitchen table one last time as just a dock worker trying to disappear. Tomorrow, he'd be something else, something new and terrifying and maybe, just maybe, exactly what he was supposed to be. He pulled out the compass, set it on the table beside the 2 bracelets, one small, one adult-sized, both bright with color and promise. Then he pulled out his phone, opened the Notes app, and started writing. Lesson 1. Awareness. How to read a room, a street, a situation before it becomes a crisis. Lesson 2. Presence. Why showing up matters, even when you're scared. Lesson 3. Boundaries. How to help without losing yourself. The words flowed easier than he expected. Years of experience distilled into something he could teach, something he could give. He wrote until his eyes burned and his coffee went cold, and when he finally stopped, he had the outline of a curriculum, rough and imperfect, but real. He looked at the photo wall across the room, Mara smiling in a dozen frozen moments, her voice an echo in his memory. Find your way back to us. I think I did. Jonah whispered to the empty room. Took a while, but I think I'm here. 6 months later, Jonah stood in front of a classroom of 20 teenagers from Harborview High. Lila sat in the back row, visiting because it was a teacher in-service day and daycare was closed. Nora sat beside her, now officially a program coordinator, clipboard in hand. Okay, Jonah said, his voice steady. Today we're talking about something simple but hard. We're talking about the moment between seeing something wrong and deciding to act. That moment where you choose to show up or look away. A kid in the front row, skinny, hoodie pulled low, raised his hand. What if you're scared? Then you're human, Jonah said. Fear doesn't mean you're weak. It means you understand the stakes. The question isn't whether you're scared. The question is whether you let fear make the choice for you. But what if acting makes things worse? A girl in the back asked. Sometimes it does, Jonah admitted. That's why we train. That's why we practice de-escalation, why we learn to call for help, why we understand our limits. Courage isn't about being fearless. It's about being scared and showing up anyway, in whatever way you can. The class was quiet. Jonah could feel them listening, really listening, the way people do when someone's telling them the truth instead of selling them a story. I'm not going to stand here and tell you to be heroes, Jonah continued. Heroes are complicated and rare and usually fictional. What I'm asking you to be is present, to notice, to care enough about the person next to you that you don't just walk by when something's wrong. That's it. That's the whole job. A hand shot up. Is it true you knocked out 3 guys in like 10 seconds? Jonah smiled, tired but genuine. It's true I stopped 3 guys from hurting someone. The rest is just details the internet exaggerated. That's so cool, someone muttered. No, Jonah said firmly. What's cool is choosing to learn how to prevent that situation in the first place. What's cool is being the person who notices someone's in trouble before it gets to fists and fear. That's the work we're doing here. That's what I'm teaching you. After class, Lila ran up and hugged his waist. You were really good, Daddy. Yeah. You sounded like a teacher and a superhero at the same time. Jonah laughed, ruffled her hair. Just a teacher, baby. Superheroes are make-believe. No, they're not, Lila said seriously. You're one. You just don't have a cape. Nora appeared, grinning. She's not wrong. Those kids hung on every word. They're good kids, Jonah said. They just needed someone to tell them they matter, that what they do matters. Arya stepped into the room, having watched from the doorway. That was incredible, Jonah. Exactly what we needed. Exactly what they needed. She walked over, handed Lila a small box. I almost forgot. This came for you. Lila opened it carefully. Inside was a bracelet professionally made this time, woven in blues and golds with a small compass charm dangling from one end. It's from the first class you taught, Arya explained. They all pitched in to make it. Said they wanted you to have something to remember them by. Lila's eyes filled with tears, happy ones. She held it up to Jonah. Look, Daddy, they made you a bracelet. Like the ones we make. Jonah took it, felt the weight of it, this small thing carrying the retex. Weight of 20 kids who'd chosen to listen, to care, to show up. It's perfect, he said, his voice rough. Arya smiled. Welcome back to True North, Jonah. For real this time. That night, on the balcony under a sky full of stars, Lila counted aloud. Jonah sat with the compass in one hand and the new bracelet in the other. Lila was curled in his lap, half asleep, humming something tuneless and content. Daddy, she murmured, are you happy now? Jonah looked out at the city, the lights, the noise, the beautiful, broken world that kept turning no matter what. He thought about Mara, about Ankara, about the alley and the choice that had changed everything. He thought about the kids in his class, about Nora's smile, about Arya's quiet thank you. He thought about the life he'd built in the margins, and the life he was building now messier, scarier, but somehow more true. Yeah, baby, he said softly. I think I am. Good. Lila yawned, snuggled deeper into his arms. Mama would be. Happy too. How do you know? Because you're helping people, and you're smiling again. Like in the old pictures. Jonah pressed his face into her hair, felt the sting of tears he didn't try to stop. I love you, Lila, more than anything. Love you more, she whispered, already drifting off. Jonah sat there, holding his daughter under the stars, the compass warm in his pocket and the bracelet secure on his wrist. Somewhere in the city, people were walking home, checking locks, making choices between staying safe and showing up. And tomorrow, he'd teach 20 more kids how to do both, how to be present without being reckless, how to care without breaking, how to find their way back when the world felt too big and too dark. Find your way back to us, Mara had said. And finally, impossibly, he had. The compass needle was still stuck. The glass was still cracked. But the star engraving caught the light from the kitchen, pointing the way it always had toward home, toward purpose, toward the people who needed someone to show up. True north wasn't a place. It was a promise, and Jonah Reyes was finally ready to keep it. If you enjoyed this story of courage, redemption, and finding your way home, don't forget to subscribe to Soul Story for more inspiring tales that remind us what it means to show up when it matters most. Drop a comment below telling us about a time someone showed up for you or a time you found the courage to show up for someone else. And hit that like button to help us share these stories with people who need to hear them. Remember, you don't need a cape to be someone's hero. You just need to care enough to act. See you in the next story.